All right, so we're diving deep today into Psalm 23, 1 to 6.
One of the all-time greats.
Yeah, and I know our listeners, they already know this passage like the back of their hand, but
Yeah.
what we're looking for are those fresh insights, those non-obvious takeaways.
Right, those nuggets.
The nuggets that'll really help bring a sermon or a study to life.
Exactly.
And we've got some amazing deep dives from pastors to help us with that. So
Absolutely.
let's just jump right in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Open Life Church, their sermon was called God as Host, Abundance Amidst Adversity. And they took a really interesting approach.
Oh, yeah, they kind of flipped the script on us a little bit, right?
Right.
Instead of focusing on that traditional shepherd imagery,
Yeah.
they highlighted God as a host, particularly in verse 5.
Okay. Yeah, and that really reframes the entire psalm, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And I think they were trying to get at the fact that David, even when he was up against some tough stuff, even when he was facing enemies, he still talks about God preparing a table before him.
Right. Right. And they even connected that back to, historically what was going on with David at the time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he was running from his son Absalom.
Yeah. Talk about adversity.
Right. So it's a powerful statement about God's provision, even when things are falling apart around you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how they brought in the story of Elisha from 2 Kings chapter 6.
Oh, yeah. That's such a great illustration.
It is. I don't remember that story all that well.
Well, so Elisha is surrounded by the Aramean army, right? And instead of calling down fire from heaven like you might expect a prophet to do,
Right.
he throws a feast for them.
Wait, he threw a party for the army that was trying to capture him?
He did, and he miraculously feeds the entire army.
Whoa.
It's this incredible picture of God's abundance turning scarcity into a banquet.
Yeah, that's a powerful visual.
And I think that's what Open Life Church was getting at, that even when things look bleak, God can transform the situation, turn it into this extravagant display of his provision.
It's like that quote, courage is fear that has said its prayers.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect.
It's not about God taking away the adversity, but rather giving us what we need to thrive right in the middle of it.
Absolutely. And Open Life Church even brought in a secular example from Spurgeon, who compared it to a soldier calmly eating his meal while he's surrounded by enemies.
Okay, yes, that unwavering trust in God's provision.
Yeah. And that's a powerful image for people to grasp.
Okay, so we've got this amazing image of God as a host, providing for us even in the midst of adversity.
Mm-hmm.
But what about that other major theme that runs through Psalm 23, the intimacy with God?
Right. Well, that's where the house comes in.
Okay.
Their sermon was called Embracing Divine Trust and Intimacy in Faith, and they really zeroed in on the concept of the secret place.
Right.
They connect that idea to the shepherd leading his sheep to a secluded spot for rest and restoration.
So it's about cultivating a personal space for prayer and reflection.
Exactly. A place where you can just be alone with God.
Yeah, and that's such a practical application for a congregation.
Yeah.
Encouraging them to find their own secret place.
Absolutely. It doesn't even have to be a physical location, although it could be.
Right. It's about setting aside that intentional time with God.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of challenging ideas, New Covenant Christian Church, DOC, they had a sermon called Embracing Inclusivity, a call to love and justice.
Oh, this is a good one.
They use the shepherd metaphor to advocate for radical inclusion and justice within the church.
I think this is a great example of how the Psalms can be so multi-layered, right? Open to different interpretations.
Yeah.
And New Covenant Christian Church, DOC, they tied the shepherd's care for all of the sheep to the church's responsibility to welcome and embrace everyone, no matter their background or beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they even contrasted that with Psalm 22, where the enemies are the ones pursuing, right?
Right. But in Psalm 23, it's God's goodness and mercy that's actively pursuing us.
Yeah, and then that leads to a really challenging question. How do we embody that same pursuing love and mercy, both as individuals and as a community?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah. How do we become that haven for people who are hurting or on the margins?
Mm-hmm.
I love that they brought in Walter Brueggemann's commentary on the Psalms.
Oh, Brueggemann, he's always thought-provoking.
Always. And they highlighted how he sees Psalm 23 as offering comfort.
Yes.
Specifically during times of loss and transition.
Yes, it's not just a general sense of peace, but a very specific solace for those seasons when everything feels like it's changing.
It's like it's speaking to a very specific need.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this whole deep dive so valuable for pastors.
Yeah.
It's about finding those specific points of connection
Right.
that will resonate with people, in different walks of life.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already, but there's still so much more to unpack.
There is.
So let's take a closer look at how some other churches are approaching this passage.
Let's do it.
Yeah, we'll be back with more insights on Psalm 23, 1-6 after this quick break.
Sounds good. Welcome back. We've been exploring some really unique takes on Psalm 23, 1-6, and I think...
Yeah, some real gems for pastors
Absolutely.
and Bible study leaders.
Yeah.
Okay, before the break, we were talking about God's provision in the midst of adversity and that call to radical inclusion.
Right. And those themes are going to keep popping up. But
Okay.
let's shift gears a bit to Seacoast Church.
Sorry.
Their sermon was Finding Peace and Fulfillment in God's Guidance, and they took a slightly different approach to the shepherd imagery.
Okay, so they didn't completely abandon the shepherd?
No, they put their own spin on it.
Okay, I'm curious.
So instead of focusing on the protection aspect,
Okay.
they emphasized the dependency of the sheep on the shepherd.
Okay.
But they were very clear that this is not about sheep being, stupid.
Yeah, I've heard that interpretation before, and it never quite sat right with me.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Sheep aren't exactly known for their intelligence,
Yeah.
but I don't think that's the main point.
No, they were highlighting our need for God's guidance,
Okay.
our dependence on him, just like sheep need the shepherd to lead them to good pasture, we need God to guide us through life.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
And to really emphasize God's active role, they brought in a fascinating Hebrew word, Radaf.
Yeah.
It means to chase or pursue.
Okay.
And they used it to describe how God's goodness and mercy, they're not just passive, they're actively seeking us out.
Whoa, okay, hold on. So instead of us always trying to find God, it's actually God who's relentlessly pursuing us.
It is, yeah, and that completely changes how we approach this whole psalm.
That's a game changer.
Right. It's not about earning God's favor or proving ourselves worthy. It's about surrendering to that love that's already there.
Yeah. Okay, but how did they illustrate this? How did they bring this Radaf concept to life for their congregation?
They use this powerful analogy of animals in the Sahara Desert. They pointed out that in such a harsh environment, even the proudest animals, even the lions, have to humble themselves and bow their heads low to drink from a stream.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
It is. It dismantles that whole idea of self-sufficiency, showing that we all have to acknowledge our need for something greater than ourselves.
Yeah, we can't do it alone.
And that's exactly what Seacoast Church was saying. True fulfillment, true peace, it comes from recognizing our need for God and humbly accepting his guidance and provision.
Yeah, surrender, not striving.
Exactly.
Wow, this has given me so much to think about.
I know, right? It's a really countercultural message, but I think it's one we all need to hear.
Yeah, especially in today's world where self-reliance is so celebrated.
Absolutely.
Okay, before we move on, I want to go back to that idea of God as a host.
Okay.
Which we were discussing with Open Life Church earlier.
Right.
Was there anything else related to that in the other sermons?
It wasn't explicitly about God as a host, but Grace Community Church had a sermon called The Overflowing Cup, Experiencing God's Abundant Grace.
Okay.
And they focused on the phrase, my cup overflows, from verse 5.
Okay, love that.
They really emphasized that it's not just about having our basic needs met, but about experiencing an abundance that spills over into every area of our lives.
Yeah, not just surviving, but thriving.
Right. It's that God's blessings are more than we could ever ask or imagine.
Yeah, and I bet they talked about how that overflowing grace isn't meant to be hoarded.
You know it. They did. They challenged their congregation to think about how they could be conduits of that grace.
Yeah, let it flow through us to others.
Exactly. Recognizing that God's abundance isn't meant to be contained, it's meant to bless others.
Beautiful. It ties back to that radical inclusion we were talking about.
It does. It all connects.
We've been talking about God as a host, God as a pursuer, God's overflowing grace.
It's like
we're seeing Psalm 23 through this brand new lens.
I know, right? Amazing how a passage we think we know so well can still surprise us.
Absolutely. I'm loving this.
Me too.
Let's keep going. Back again with the deep dive. Man, look at Psalm 23, 1-6 has been amazing.
Yeah, so many fresh perspectives.
I feel like I'm seeing it with new eyes.
It's incredible, isn't it? The power of Scripture.
And especially for our listeners, pastors and Bible study leaders.
Oh, absolutely. Always looking for those new insights to share.
Okay, before we wrap up, I want to go back to that idea of the secret place.
Yes. The house really hit on something there.
It's not just about finding a physical spot to pray, right?
Right. It's about cultivating that inner sanctuary.
Like a place of stillness and peace within.
Exactly. Where we can truly be alone with God.
It's like that image of the shepherd leading his sheep to a place of safety and rest.
Yeah. Such a powerful visual.
And I think in today's world, that's such a crucial message.
Oh, absolutely.
Encouraging people to create that space for solitude.
It's almost countercultural, isn't it?
It is. But I think people are longing for it.
Deep down, I think we all are.
Yeah, to unplug, step away from the noise.
Be present with God.
Okay, but practically speaking, how can pastors incorporate this into their sermons or studies?
Well, sharing personal stories can be really powerful.
Yeah, being vulnerable.
Exactly. Letting people see how it's impacted your own life.
And maybe offering practical tips too, right?
Yeah, like setting aside time for prayer and reflection.
Finding a quiet spot in nature.
Even practicing being more present in everyday moments.
Maybe even giving them some prompts or questions to think about.
Yeah, like what is God saying to you right now?
What are you grateful for? Love that.
It's about giving them the tools to cultivate that intimacy with God.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into Psalm 23, 1-6, I feel like I have a whole new understanding of this passage.
I know, me too. It's been so enriching.
God as a host, a pursuer, a provider of overflowing grace, the importance of that secret place.
It's amazing how much depth there is here.
And I hope our listeners feel equipped to approach this passage with fresh eyes.
That's the goal.
And remember, it's not just a beautiful poem.
Right.
It's a guide for living.
A source of comfort and strength.
So let its message sink deep into your heart.
Let it shape you.
And shape how you minister to others.
Beautifully said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Psalm 23, 1-6.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've been inspired and challenged.
And that you'll see this familiar passage in a whole new light.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.